response video to the critique of the pettiest man on earth. Keeps winning the award every week. Half a day. Anyway, it's just so it sort of just makes my argument for me. You talk about how science has lost credibility, and then these defenders of the science show no intellectual honesty, any kind of reasoning skills, anything called integrity at all, any give a damn about the truth whatsoever. Just an amazingly lazy, sloppy, just made up response, as if they've taken care of the problem. You know, they've proven that it's not true, that there's something incredible being said by a scientist. It's just awful. Yeah, that's what it is. Maybe I didn't realize it's a UK article, so maybe that's part of it too. He's defending the old UK liars. But anyway, it just so I'll play the video. So this is a response to what I pointed to was a preposterously silly article in which the evidence presented had nothing to do with the actual argument being made in the article. And even if they had coherent photographs, what they claim it to be of is just made up. They're just claiming, you know, they have one supernova that's lensed 4 times, and then they say, you know, 2 years later, because it took a longer path, this is the same supernova, when there's no reason to think there's any gravitational lens. First off, it can't be this lens, because this lens obviously got used up here from this distance, and it's going to be incredibly weak out here, so this has to be a different gravitational lens they're seeing the object in. And here the lens is showing the images as 4 images, which means the supernova has to be behind this lens. So the odds of it showing up here in a different lens are astronomical. And they're just making it up. Like, okay, every time a supernova happens, I'll say it's the same one. This is like the same electron argument. Physicists actually make the argument that the same electron is interdimensionally traveling and creating every interaction in the universe. The same electron. It's insane. Anyway, so, you know, on to the crappy tape.
Okay, helping a brother out again. My brother.
Yeah, I don't know what that crap is, but, you know, yeah, it's just incredibly obnoxious, you disgusting pedophile. So every time you do this, it's disgusting, obnoxious shit. I mean, this is a John Wayne movie. John Wayne would just punch you in the face. I mean, you know that, right? You're just an obnoxious, petty shit weasel. So I'll help you out and point out you're fat and ugly. You ought to do something about it.
DraftScience. It's quite simple, really.
Yeah, it's quite simple, really. So that's his argument. So he thinks he's got this argument of high integrity that he's going to be making, and it's this simple, oh yeah, you just made a simple miscalculation. And his defense is going to be invisible man, absolute made-up crap. I mean, the simple solution to the problem is you just don't have some kind of gullible mentality, and you don't have a willingness to just make up complete shit like the photograph's upside down, or crooked, the magazine perverted it, or, you know, some kind of silly, nonsensical mush.
In 2014, picture not shown.
Right, the picture not shown for no good reason, apparently, right? I mean, the sequence of pictures should be 4 supernovas. Well, the first picture should be no supernovas. Well, no, you can do the in-between picture. 4 supernovas being lensed, 1 supernova being lensed 4 times, that image. Then the supernovas died out, they're no longer giving off light, and you don't see them anymore. And then 2 years later, you see this new one all by itself over in a new location, and that's the 2-year delayed image of the original supernova. That should have been the sequence of photos. And that story in itself is preposterous. But the fact that these photos don't even match the story just makes this ludicrously preposterous. You've achieved ludicrous logic.
It was the first occurrence of these S1, S2, S3, S4 images of the supernova. We don't have that picture, so we can't judge whether this is...
Well, we do have that picture right here. We can judge that there's no supernovas, so they circle the empty spots where it was. And yet they're circling the spot where the other one wasn't either. And then all 5 of them are in this image, and there's not supposed to be an image of all 5 of them at the same time, because this one can't be 2 years later if these 4 are still in the image. Can't be 2 years later then. Can't be.
The S1, S2 were brighter at the time. Let's say they weren't, but it said...
Why would we say they weren't? But whatever. Why would I care about how bright they are? Point is whether it's the same supernova.
Days that they faded to an extent that they was gone. That means this is an overlay to show you the story. Yeah, you have the one image overlaid on the other. So
okay, what image overlaid on what image? So there's this image can't be an overlay because the whatever you call these diffraction patterns are in this image here, and they're not here. So the diffraction patterns are unique to each image, and the diffraction patterns in this image don't exist in this image, so it can't be an overlay of this image with another image. So what 2 images is this a composite of? Ones you just made up out of nothing. And for what purpose would you overlay the 2 images but to confuse the story, to not tell the story correctly? Overlaying the images completely, you're trying to show 2 different things happening at different times. By overlaying the images, you make them both happen at the same time. How would that at all be illustrative of the phenomenon? It would be exactly the opposite of illustrating the phenomenon. It was completely disguised the phenomenon. It doesn't make any sense. And then I'll just point out, the photographs are dated. Why would they date a photograph? Look at the bigger image. January 2011. December 2015. These are the 2 sources for the image. One probably being infrared and one being optical or something like that. And they're both labeled, clearly. Now, why would you label an image that isn't one image? Is that the date they combine the 2 images? Of course not. Is it the date of one of the images? Well, that wouldn't make any sense. So your theory is absolute, completely insane gibberish. I mean, it can't be considered within the realm of anything called reasonable. It's showing up at court with the UFOs did it. It's so bad. And yet you'll be this obnoxious and arrogant with this kind of rubbish as an argument in defense of a science that's being attacked for being full of nonsense, made up nonsense, very weak arguments. And here you are making weak arguments in defense of weak arguments.
well, they don't have to show, they can, for brevity's sake.
For brevity's sake, destroy the entire illusion you're trying to create, the entire point you're trying to make, which is one event happened 2 years after the other event. And you completely destroy that by putting both of them in the same time. And that somehow could possibly make sense. So I'm the one making the accusation that science is sloppy and messy, and they're not very good scientists. And you're essentially making the argument that they're complete idiots. I mean, they can't even figure out something a grammar school kid could figure out. That if I superimpose 2 images on top of each other of different events at different times, that you're going to lose the whole function of them happening at a different time. So That's how you respond to the accusation that science has been too reckless and sloppy, is by pointing out how scientists are complete idiots. Very good job.
Keep the story simple. So we have, in essential, before events, here in January, nothing. Yeah? And after we see these events, it's not a video, it's not a time lapse.
It doesn't have to be any of those things. It just has to be a coherent 3 photographs in the proper sequence. And you're saying they superimpose 2 of them on top of each other, that completely destroys the point of the story.
This image, it's just a one-off overlay to show you the objects. The story.
Right, so this is his theory. So he's presenting this as a rational theory, that they did a one-off superimposing, whatever a one-off is, and then dated the photograph as if it was the same as this photograph, as if it was made by the same source and created the same way, and yet this one is 2 photographs superimposed on top of each other. And they didn't point that out anywhere in the documentation, anywhere. And you're saying that's a credible way of doing science. That's how you defend the credibility of science, is by justifying a complete deception, insufficient information, overt distortion and manipulation of the evidence, and you're defending it. That's of course that's the way you present your facts. You don't label it properly, and you create complete misrepresentations and distortions. See, he's making my argument for me.
Story about the sequence in which these objects.
Right, so now he admits it doesn't match the sequence. If we really play, let's play that again just to be sure we get that part, which is hilarious.
In which these objects
appeared. Come on.
Appeared is above and provided in the link in DraftScience. In which these objects.
Oh, sorry.
The story about the sequence in which these objects appeared is above and provided in the link.
No.
In DraftScience's last video.
Above. It's not above, it's below.
The fact that they predicted it, should count for something.
Okay, so the fact that they predicted something they haven't even come close to proving, which is that this supernova that appears 4 times in obviously out of symmetrical proportion. The lens can't be this shape. Lenses aren't ovals and funny shapes like that, so that's not going to happen. And the preposterous notion is that these 4 supernovas, 2 years later, this showed up. But obviously this photograph shows all 5 of them together, so this can't be 2 years later. So what did they predict exactly? And this generic prediction that, hey, someday we might see 4 lenses compounded on each other. We might see something lensed 700 times. We might see Hathaway's big fat ass, on the other side of the Milky Way. I mean, somebody can predict all kinds of preposterous shit. All right? But they didn't predict anything in the sense they haven't proven that that dot is the same as that other dot. Where's their proof? Shit. The whole thing doesn't make any sense at all because, frankly, stars usually aren't just floating around all by themselves. They're usually connected to some galaxy or some clump. And so why doesn't this lens reveal any of the other structure? Just one single supernova. Come on.
Thanks a lot for the theory of gravitational lensing.
Okay, so he thinks this is good evidence again. This is the kind of evidence that proves the case, boy. This is really strong and hard evidence of gravitational lensing. So that's it obviously is just a religion. It's obviously worse than I had thought. That yes, if this is so bad, and you can see his willingness to believe it. And so you got to just imagine that maybe the scientists are just as big of pussies. Maybe they're just as much a girly man, don't give a fuck about the truth at all, just play our little fantasy games and write our books and be little heroes because we found magical lensing things, because we just made it up. I can make up a story for every one of these fucking dots. I can call this one Joe and I call this one Jimmy and say, well, they had a big fight when they were 14 years old, you know, because Joe borrowed 58 cents, you know, to see if he could seduce a girl into letting him, you know, rub her pussy, but she wouldn't do it for 50 cents, and he spent the money on candy, and then he didn't give the money back to Jim. I can make up crap. And that's all this is made up fucking crap. And you're sitting there making an argument defending it. And then saying you care about the truth. You care about the fucking subject of science somehow. I mean, this is just so fucking disgusting. And notice why you're making this fucking video is because you're a petty weasel. To boot. But amazing. Defending this rubbish science. This is such fucking garbage. And the fact that you weasels can't admit that this is garbage evidence. And you're praising it. Oh, it's another great pillar in our fantastic argument for our completely made up bullshit theory of wave mechanics.
In fact, Jim Mendham talks about his lenses about being light years across. They're not light years across. They're thousands of light years.
No, they don't have to be thousands. They have images of lensing around dwarfs, red dwarfs. They have images of lensing around galaxies that are 50 light years across. I mean, galaxies come in all kinds of sizes. So fuck you and that bullshit too.
Years across.
Yeah, so exactly. So here, I'll let him say it. Wait till you hear this part.
This is a massive galactic cluster.
Okay, so he's saying this is a galactic cluster. I mean, this is obviously the object they're claiming the lensing is around. And so this is your lens. And this is, he's saying, a cluster. Now, I don't think clusters are that consistently bright, so I don't think there's any chance it's a cluster. It has every appearance of being a single galaxy. And this galaxy actually looks like these two galaxies are pulling crap from each other, so they look like they're in the same plane. Now, maybe they're not, but they certainly appear to be because everything's sized the same. The little dots around this one are the same size as the little dots around this one. And if those are novae, you know, that are appearing, or things as bright as a novae, that's the other problem here. What are all these little things here? So he's saying these are all individual little galaxies flying off of this center big bright galaxy thingy. The cluster has a core, but regardless, the point is a cluster. If this is a galaxy cluster again, and you're saying this is hundreds or thousands of light years across, the gravitational potential here would be so fucking insignificant that if you're going to argue something got completely lensed, its entire image got shoved in here, if you're going to say something like that, then you're going to have to explain how any photon ever gets across the universe without getting distorted. And massively distorted by every single one of these objects it passes anywhere near. Hundreds of millions of miles away from things. And the light's getting bent all over the shit place. It's a preposterously founded theory.
And the reason we see it, it's clearly a supernova in a galaxy behind this cluster, wherein...
And no other part of the galaxy is visible. So yes, so these supernovas are so bright that they're the outstanding feature of the galaxy that's behind this galaxy. And again, it got lensed 4 times. One star got lensed in 4 places, and those 4 places in this massively huge object with completely unsymmetrical gravitational symmetry. So even though gravity tends to go spherical, not in this case.
You know, we say supernovas can outshine entire galaxies, they're so powerful. As, what's his name, the Gelfand fella pointed out, the idea of an explosion that makes 1,000 light year ring, yeah, is not contemplated.
Says you. Okay, so and you should not contemplate, like somehow you can't imagine a light source when they've already found galaxies at the end of the universe that are hundreds of times brighter than any other galaxy they've ever seen because there's so much light. being lensed. And you're so confident that you'll mock and shut other people up because you think this evidence is so rock solid. This isn't just made up. No, this is somehow hard, real evidence, like the evidence that this pen is in my hand. It's like really solid evidence. God, you people are outrageous.
There's no known phenomena or imagined phenomena that can...
Well, yeah, except for the phenomena I pointed out, which are the jets that come out of galaxies that contain more energy than, you know... I mean, the 60 Symbols guy was even impressed by the numbers, when you calculate the numbers out, how much energy is coming out of those jets.
Do that. Furthermore, these objects are so far back in time.
Yeah, so he had to stop there. I have it sped up, and that's how long this pause was. So this is where he really gets irrelevant. Like, somehow they're so far back in time, like that has something to do with any of it. The light is on its way. What does how far back in time they are have to do with the photons that were on their way?
For the light to have travelled out there as an explosion, to have travelled itself
what it's a source of, it doesn't matter. The photon doesn't care whether an explosion created it or a light bulb created it. The photons don't care what the source of the emission of the photon was. They don't have any, they don't carry any information regarding that, or does it, it has no significant effect on their voyage.
Thousands of light years would probably invalidate the life of the universe. There probably isn't time.
Another imbecilically silly kind of notion, correct? I mean, you could argue that if you have these huge lenses where you are lensing stuff way the hell out here, and then bending it the same amount of bend that you get here, you know, it has to be more bend. So when it shows up here, you have to understand that the source is behind this. So this distance is quite a bit of distance. It's not 2 years worth of difference. I think that's a lot more than 2 years to go this far out. I think it's more than 2 years difference.
For it to be an explosion.
So I don't even know. So if that wasn't complete incoherent mush, I don't know what was. Something to do with somehow the light in the age of the universe is in jeopardy because the light from the supernova lensed. I don't think so.
You know, you could hypothesize it was some sort of mini Big Bang or something. But there's still the timing constraints to see it.
There's no timing constraints. It took billions of years to get here, and it went through this silly lens 5 billion light years away. That's the argument. What is your contention here? So he's adding this extra fluff that had nothing to do with my argument, that the article's a pile of shit. And he's adding this irrelevant mush just to prove how stupid he is.
The only story that fits is gravitational lensing.
The only story that fits. Yeah, so there couldn't possibly be that these are just phenomenon connected with this swirly bit, just like these little dots are phenomenon connected with this swirly bit. That can't be the explanation, that these little dots here are actually some sort of substance, and that's all these things are. They're not supernovas or something special. They're the same pieces of crap that are here, like this dot, this dot. How is this dot or this dot any different than that dot and that dot? Fuck this bullshit.
And the fact that they've roughly taken account of the kind of matter distribution and warped lens that this is creating.
Yes, a warped lens that's still creating spherical objects. So they're showing up as round objects, yet they're going through a inverse square law lens that's wrongly positioned. And we're supposed to believe that they're still going to project as round objects. Oh yeah, that all makes sense. Sure.
that has allowed them to predict, probably somewhere in this area, not that exact point, I'd be surprised.
Yeah, I don't think there was any point that would make any sense. So you are going to keep, again, this whole idea that they speculated about the fact that, well, you know, when something lenses, there's light that's traveling horizontal and, you know, or at some other preposterous angle, and it could hit a lens, you know, thousands or hundreds of thousands of light years away and be lensed to us also. Yes, the odds are 1 in a billion, but who cares? It's fun to talk about. And Hothladay will believe us no matter what kind of crappy evidence we provide. He'll believe us when we tell him we did it. Because he'll believe anything.
That there will be an image formed upon our eye in this, this later, longer travel distance.
Yes, and that could have been here, it could have been here, it could have been here, it could have been anywhere else. The fact that the lens would essentially have to be associated with this object here seems to me to make it quite unlikely that it would lens backward out of the gravity. But that's, you know, outside of the lens. You can't really have something outside of the lens lensing. And it certainly seems the lens would have to be in the wrong position for this light in this lens to take the same vector as the light from these objects to get to us. It can't happen. I don't think that's even theoretically possible. Even in a magical 49 million dimension universe, you still wouldn't have enough permutations to make that possible.
So it's true. What Inmendham says is that the pictures don't really fit the story.
Right. So this is not a minor claim, okay? This is like claiming UFOs or something. You're claiming I'm watching the same event happen twice because it's time delayed based on lensing, which basically is they're almost arguing that we can see the universe's history over and over again from different positions. We can watch the movie over and over again. We just have to know where to point our camera to watch the same event over and over.
But it's more than likely, you know.
So it's more than likely, you know, that it's all okay because it's in a science, you know, it's in a business journal, and it's a reprint of a, you know, an article that was in the journal for the silly fucktards. And, you know, obviously all the stuff in the journal for the silly fucktard is good stuff. You know, it's all been real well vented. So there wouldn't be any kind of bogus, silly, wrong images or any of that kind of crap. I mean, they really ought to do sting operations, and they ought to have people, you know, make up really good professional documents that are just full of gibberish, you know, but they make, like, really fun claims, like, you know, we lensed the same object 17 times or something, and, you know, and present evidence that's this weak, and just to see how many times they can fool the publishers, just because it's presented by a PhD, or an institution, a university, and that's all you need. They say so, so it must be true. That's all that's going on here.
Given the way it's touted, it's either an overlay or these dots were significantly brighter.
You know, that's still not going to fix it. The missing photograph is this all by itself, without these dots. If these dots are in the same photograph with this dot, this one can't be 2 years later. Can't happen that way.
And there's still a remnants of a glow after a supernova.
Well, that doesn't even make any sense. I mean, if it's so bright when it's exploding that once that explosion diminishes, then there's not going to be, you know, it's obviously it dies somewhat slowly, but it doesn't die I mean, it happens in a matter of months. And it's done.
So, there you have it.
There I have what? The crappiest, lamest defense ever presented as a serious argument ever in the history of mankind. I mean, what do you want me to say? They ought to make a Simpsons show just about people as dumb as fucking you. Yeah, I guess that's the end. He's just going to stare at his screen and try to press the stop button if he can find it. So anyway, just horrible crap. But again, it does make my point. If this is what the defenders are willing to do, you know, the fairly ignorant, okay, I don't think Hofstadter understands gravity at all. I don't think he gets the whole galaxy on edge thing versus this way, and how the thickness of the end of my finger is much shorter than the length of my finger, and that if you were actually going to have lensing, it would be across the length of my finger. It would be a much more gravity over time than the end of my finger, especially when the heaviest part of my finger is this middle part, the most gravity, that this most gravity is closer to the top of my finger than the tip of my finger. Can you understand that argument? Dumb ass. Okay, anyway. So anyway, making my point. If this is how this is just desperately stupid, just making up crap about how this is a superimposed image when it's dated, which doesn't make any... You don't date an image that's a superimposed image, and then it can't be a superimposed image with this image because, as I point out, there are defects in this image that don't exist in this image. Anyway. So yeah, if this is the temperament, if Pirro and Hofstadter are an example of the attitude of the average scientist, that's why science is a mess. It's because these people are willing to just throw all reason and all logical integrity out the window to verify their unicorn theories, their made-up crap, because it's a notion they like. Because they don't understand enough to know how it was a stupid notion from the very start if you understood that force, what light is, which is a force, it's not matter. It's force. And forces aren't bent by force. You're never going to bend magnetism, with magnetism. You're not going to, you don't bend gravity. Why would you think you can bend light? The whole point of it, having the constant speed, is sort of a taboo against bending it. Because if you could bend it, you could accelerate it, or you could decelerate it. Shit. So stupid. Anyway. Yeah, that's all. There's no point. I mean, these people just will not make a fair argument. And they have no standards. They'll, like I said, I propose something, I have to explain everything, even its origin, from the very start of the universe. These assholes make some bogus claim that this is the same supernova as this. They don't have to show you anything. No evidence, and the evidence they show contradicts what they're claiming, and that's still okay.